Azamallahu ujurakum, my condolences on the occasion of the martyrdom of our 11th Imam, Imam Hassan al-Askari alayhi salam. The martyrdom of one Imam usually marks the beginning of the Imamah of the next Imam. So tonight, from the one side, we are commemorating a sad and tragic event. From another side, we are also commemorating and remembering a monumental event. And that is the beginning of the Imamah of the 12th Imam, the chosen king, the divine promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to free the earth from oppression and injustice and unfairness after it has been filled with tyranny and oppression. So tonight, inshallah, I will try to discuss some elements from the life of Imam Hassan al-Askari, but also discuss some points pertaining to the Imam of our time. So the two are linked. Of course, the actual date of the martyrdom is upcoming, and I believe it's either on a Monday or a Tuesday, but here we're gathered on this weekend to learn more about these two important individuals, the 11th Imam and of course our beloved Imam, the Imam of our time. One interesting question that for whoever reads history, the history of the Imams, is the question that has to do with the lifespans of the last few Imams, in particular after Imam al-Rida alayhi salam. Imam al-Rida lived for about 52 years. But if you look at Imam al-Jawad, he became an Imam at a young age, but he also passed away relatively young. He lived a total lifetime of 25 years. Very short. Imam al-Hadi alayhi salam, the 10th Imam, lives for about 40 years. And Imam Hassan al-Askari, once again, he becomes Imam and takes on this important position at the age of 22, and he is martyred, unfortunately, at the age of 28. Yani probably an age close to many of the brothers here. So the question is, why is it the case that these later Imams are being martyred at a much younger age? Generally speaking, however, the Imams did not live a long lifetime. All of them, if you look from the beginning, even Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, he left this world in his early 60s. So did Imam Ali. Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam in his early 50s. Most of them did not have a long lifetime as you would expect, into their 80s and 90s, like some of our Maraja right now. Correct? Sayyid al-Sistani, may Allah prolong his life. I believe he's well into his 90s. Sayyid al-Khamenei, he's in his 80s. And a lot of our scholars, they live long lifetimes because they're healthy individuals, they are pious individuals, they stay away, they have simple lives. So you'd expect the same to be true for the people that taught them these lifestyles, the Imams, for them to live very much into their 90s. Salman, who was a follower of Rasulullah, who was a follower of the Imams, he lived, mashallah, into his hundreds, I think nearing 200. So it's very possible for people to live such a long lifetime. Why is it that, firstly, the Imams are living 60, 50, and then it gets worse towards the end? The later Imams, after Imam al-Rida, alayhi salam, they live even shorter lifetimes. They're killed and assassinated at a much younger age. Well, in a general sense, by the way, as a point of trivia, which one of you would know who is the oldest Imam in the sense of who lived the longest? Don't say Imam al-Mahdi because, mashallah, he's still living, 1,000 years old. But from the Imams, who lived the longest? Does anyone know? Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, ahsant. Imam al-Sadiq is referred to as Sheikh al-A'imma. Right, the Sheikh of the Imams. In Arabic, the term Sheikh is referred usually, linguistically, it's for someone who is older. And that's why the head of a tribe was always someone who was older, and they would call him the Sheikh of that tribe, Sheikh al-Ashira. Sheikh al-A'imma is Imam al-Sadiq, and he only, according to the best report we have, the longest lifespan that has been recorded for him, he lived 68 years. And there's a report that he was martyred at the age of 65. So this is the general sense that comes with the Imams and their lifespan. The reason for this is natural. There were enemies, there were a thorn in the eyes of the enemy, correct? They were always a strong opposition. The Ahlul Bayt were always a strong opposition, a strong candidate to rulership. Imam Hassan al-Askari, despite his very young age, even those around the Khalifa of the time said, if the Khalifa was not the ruler right now, this young man is the most deserving person to be the ruler. They knew the Ahlul Bayt, they had piety, they had knowledge, they had the religiosity, they had the lineage, they had the legitimacy, the divine legitimacy to be in that position. They had these God-given attributes to be able to manage people and the world as a whole. So they were seen as a threat, and most of the time rulers, one after another, would try to eliminate the threat of the Imams using politics, using pressure, by pressuring their followers, by putting them up into debates, by doing X, Y, and Z to somehow eliminate the threat of the Imam without having to assassinate him. Eventually, they would realize one after another that they are failing at this, that they cannot win over these great individuals, that they are always outsmarted. So they would use the last blow they could, and they would kill the Imam and completely remove him physically from life. However, so you would expect the same to happen at least with the last three Imams before the Imam of our time. Why is it that they are even living a shorter lifespan? We said 25, 40, and 28. Very short lifespans. This has to do with what I call the Imam Rida experiment. Ma'mun thought he's smarter than his forefathers. He thought that while my father Harun imprisoned Imam Musa al-Kadhim to limit him, to make sure he is under his wings, he cannot be able to enforce his power, and through his followers and through the politics that was available to him, Imam Musa al-Kadhim had a vast network of Shia, almost an underground government at his disposal. A lot of money was coming to him, a lot of the Shia were following him, and this was all due to the works of his forefathers building this network from the time of Imam al-Sajjad until it reaches the time of Imam al-Kadhim. Harun put the Imam in chains, put him in prison, put him through a difficult time. Ma'mun thought, you know what, I'm going to use a different strategy. I am going to play smarter than my forefathers. I am going to smear the name of Ali ibn Musa al-Rida. Okay? If they try to imprison him, I am going to go one step different. I'm going to try a different methodology altogether. My strategy is to become closer to the Imam. I'm going to bring him close to rulership, to the Abbasids. I am going to place him as the second in charge, as the person to succeed the crown after I pass away officially, the crown prince. So people can see that the Ahlul Bayt, the Imams of the Ahlul Bayt, although they're advertised to be Zahids, they're advertised to be very pious, they're advertised not to care about this world, they actually love this world. I'll surround him in a palace, I'll bring women to him, I'll bring wealth to him, I'll bring influence to him, and I'll smear the name of Imam Ali ibn Musa al-Rida, and I'll bring his reputation down in front of the people. That was his plan. Of course, forcefully, eventually, he brought the Imam from Medina to his government in Maru, right, close to nowadays Iran and Uzbekistan. And this was the plan he had. But once again, little did he know who he's facing, right? These men, these individuals are the best of creation. In terms of their brilliance in politics, in terms of their brilliance in intelligence, in dealing with people, their people skills, their social intelligence, they are number one. They know what's going on, let alone their ability to be guided and aided by a divine force, by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, inspiring them with the knowledge they need to go through these ploys. They were themselves very smart political individuals. So Imam Ali ibn Musa could see right through this. But he used this ploy against Ma'mun. It's like, okay, beautiful. You want to give me a podium and you want to present yourself as a lover for the Ahlul Bayt. I will use this opportunity to propagate the message of the Ahlul Bayt. I'll use this opportunity to publicly speak about the authority and the virtues of the Ahlul Bayt. So what began as a ploy, as a trick to bring down the name of Ahlul Bayt, Imam Al-Rida alayhi salam used this to propagate the name of the Ahlul Bayt. Just to paint you a picture of what actually happened, right? Imagine right now one of the most important governments in the world, be it the United States, Russia, China, right? They invite someone, Shia, one of the scholars, right? And they say, we want to assign him as our second in charge. of course, all the media is going to be in this person. Whatever he says is going to be propagated across the lands. This is the opportunity that was given to Imam al-Rida alayhi salam. The debates that are taking place, okay, imagine a debate takes place in Congress, and it's a debate about who should rule. And one of the people that is part of this debate is a Shi'i, okay? Now there is a mayor in New York, supposedly he's Shia, and everyone is, there's a frenzy. Oh, we have a Shia mayor for New York. It's a big deal, right? Now imagine the second in charge for America, okay, was someone like Imam al-Rida alayhi salam, or a leading scholar. Of course, there will be a lot of attention to him. And because they have given him official legitimacy, now he can say whatever he likes. He does not have to practice taqiyya as much as his forefathers did. So you see, during the time of Imam al-Rida alayhi salam, the authority of the Ahlul Bayt and their love is much more established in the hearts of the people. People who had not heard the name of the Ahlul Bayt are now lovers of the Ahlul Bayt. People who did not know the authority of the Ahlul Bayt are now giving up their life for the Ahlul Bayt. So Ma'mun's trick and politics and ploy turned against him. And Imam al-Rida did what he could in propagating the name of the Ahlul Bayt. Aslan, one of the reasons why Iran right now today is a stronghold for the Shia, is because of Imam Rida alayhi salam. That move that happened almost 1,000 years ago, right? Over 1,000 years ago, Imam Rida enabled a stronghold for the Shia in the country we call Iran today. That's how far they had of a vision for the Shia. The successors to Ma'mun saw the failed experiment, saw that, okay, this is not going to work. And we saw that the previous caliphs, they tried to use a lot of politics when they could to eliminate the threats of the imams. That also, they saw the failure of that. So now the new caliphs, the new rulers, these illegitimate rulers, the Abbasids, would come to the option of assassinating the imams even earlier. They're like, you know what, we've learned our lesson. We saw Ma'mun fail terribly. All he did was give more love and authority to the Ahlul Bayt. We are going to assassinate these beautiful individuals much earlier. Okay, so this is why you see Imam al-Jawad, Imam al-Hadi, and Imam Hassan al-Askari die at a much younger age. But when it comes in particular to the 11th Imam, there is a second and more important reason. And the reason is they knew, the Abbasids knew, of course. The Abbasids, by the way, are closer to Bani Hashim than the Umayyads. Because Bani al-Abbas and Bani Hashim, they were considered to be both enemies to Banu Umayyah. When the Abbasids take over the Umayyads, they were trying to use the name of the Ahlul Bayt to do this. Aslan, they called themselves the Ahlul Bayt. We are the Ahlul Bayt. Abbas is the uncle of Rasulullah, and the lineage is connected. They are cousins. So they say, we are cousins to the Ahlul Bayt, we are cousins to Bani Hashim, we are the Ahlul Bayt. So they knew the heritage of the Ahlul Bayt, the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt. And for this reason, by the way, the pressure that the Abbasids placed on the Imams was worse than the pressure that the Umayyads placed. Because with the Umayyads, they at least did not know or did not have the same extent of knowledge to how the Ahlul Bayt would protect themselves. The defense strategy, the taqiyya that the Ahlul Bayt would use against the Umayyads, the Abbasids knew this because they would be in their houses. At that time, they were not open enemies. So when it comes to the times of the Abbasids, they know how the Ahlul Bayt want to protect themselves. So then they made their lives even more difficult. Amongst the things they knew that is well propagated and taught and reinforced in the school of Ahlul Bayt is the idea of the 12th Imam, the Mahdi. Of course, this is a shared teaching between Sunni and Shia. It's a hadith from Rasulullah, many hadith about Rasulullah about the Mahdi. But they knew in particular the details that the Ahlul Bayt would say about the Mahdi. And that's why some of these khulafa, these Abbasid khulafa, actually had the name Al-Mahdi, right? They would choose that name to deceive people, to mislead people as if they are the Mahdi, and take attention away from the true Mahdi that is coming. Because they knew that the 12th Imam is going to be born from this 11th Imam, they wanted to ensure that this does not happen. That the chosen and divine promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the legacy that was promised by Rasulullah, does not take place. the promise does not fulfill. So they tried to limit the life of Imam Hassan al-Askari as much as they could before he could have any children. They would always monitor his activity with his wives. What is he doing? Is there a child labor? Is someone pregnant? What's going on? Always keeping an eye on the Imam to make sure no child is born. And to ensure that no child is born, okay, they kill the Imam at a very young age. So in a way, Imam Hassan al-Askari becomes a sacrifice for the 12th Imam. From that perspective, it's a very sad event, right? Beautiful in one sense, one Imam sacrificing himself for another Imam to ensure that God's promise continues, but also very sad. And it's a point of reflection for us. If an Imam is sacrificing himself, if an Imam's life is put to threat because of the 12th Imam, then what is our lives in comparison, right? My life and your life altogether is nowhere the same in value than the life of Imam Hassan al-Askari. But he was martyred because they knew that the 12th Imam would be from him. What are our lives worth, you know? How easy does it become to say, sometimes you hear some of our figures, our leaders, rahmatullah alayhim, they would say, I wish my entire life was dedicated to a certain individual. Yeah? You hear that and you think to yourself, wow, what's going on? That's a very profound and not an easy dua to make. It's a serious thing to say. Take all of my life and give it to someone who's not an Imam. Right? But if it is an Imam, if it is someone of that importance, of that status, it becomes a bit more acceptable. That I give all of my life. If the 11th Imam gave all of his life, then what is my life worth in comparison? That's one point in regards to the history of Imam Hassan al-Askari. From the achievements of this beautiful Imam is once again something that has, went under the radar, unnoticed, because unfortunately we may not be very well versed with the history, with the achievements and accomplishments of the Imams. You see, after the time of Imam al-Sajjad, the Ahlul Bayt changed their strategy. They went from open confrontation, like Imam al-Hussein, like Imam al-Hassan, like Imam Ali, to underground confrontation. Because after Imam Hussein's battle in Karbala, the Shia were pretty much dismantled, okay? As a political group, they were dismantled. Yes, you had these uprisings here and there, Mukhtar and Tawabin, but as a strong social political network that is organized and can do something, they were gone. They were gone. So the Ahlul Bayt changed their strategy from the time of Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam to one of underground confrontation, which meant educating students, having one-to-one relationships with them, as opposed to openly, publicly calling for their own leadership like Imam al-Hussein did, right? Or Imam Ali did, or Imam al-Hassan did. They would have this one-on-one basis with their students. And they would raise the likes of Zurara, right? Zurara, a very senior and important companion of Imam al-Baqir and Imam al-Sadiq. Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam says, if it was not for Zurara, the teachings and the hadiths of my father, Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam, they would have been perished. They would have been lost. You and I would have not had these reports with us. Aban ibn Taghlib, another senior companion of Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, the Imam says, لَقَدْ أَوْجَعَ قَلْبِي wafatu or mautu Aban ibn Taghlib. My heart has become in pain. My heart is pained for the demise of one of his companions, Aban. Imagine that. You are so important in the eyes of the Imam that his heart hurts. Of course, we never want the heart of the Imam to hurt because of us, right? Inshallah, 1,000 of me and the likes of me are, sacrificed in their way and nothing shakes in their hearts. But it's also a big honor for someone to reach such a station that the Imam loves you so much that when you pass away, that when you are martyred, the Imam says, my heart hurts for Aban ibn Taghlib. Because this individual was amongst the students that he had put all his life into, training them, educating them, bringing them up. Hisham ibn Hakam, this will be more relevant to us because he was a young man. In the reports it says he barely had a full beard when Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam would send him to debate the leaders of other ideologies and other theological groups. He barely had a full beard, meaning he was probably in his early 20s at best, if not in his late teens. The Imam loved him so much that when he would enter the tent, you know how the Imam would go Hajj and all the companions would meet him in Hajj. When Hisham ibn al-Hakam would come, the Imam would get up for him, go to the door of the tent, if you like, the opening of the tent, and welcome him. Say, Hisham is here. How beautiful is that? The Imams had this strategy of this underground network of training students. And they trained many students. And the education of their followers happened by training these individuals, and then these individuals would go to different towns and train others. So through a hadith heritage, okay? They would hear the ahadith, the reports of Imam al-Sadiq, Imam al-Baqir, right? These senior students of the Imam, they would go to different areas and then they would teach these. They would go to Kufa, they would go to, for example, Qum, right? They would go to Ahwaz, and they would teach the followers, the lovers, through the ahadith. As effective and important and foundational as this hadith heritage of education was, this hierarchy that was created to educate the followers of the Ahlul Bayt, it had some limitations. And the limitations are still felt till today. You and I, for example, do we feel, all of us, very comfortable, for example, to open a book of hadith and say, oh, this is a teaching of Imam al-Kadhim, I'm going to take this hadith on board 100%? No. You know that you're not a scholar. You know that hadith could be authentic, hadith could be weak, hadith could have this problem, that problem. You do not know the narrators. So sometimes when you go back to hadith, you have this lack of confidence whether this was issued by the Imam, whether this was issued by Rasulullah. Yes? Dealing with hadith always has this limitation that it does require a little bit of expertise. It requires a little bit of investigation. Just like you and I today, well, hopefully not me after being in the Hawza, but most of us who have not, been trained in hadith studies, we don't always feel the most direct connection with hadith unless someone tells us this is authentic, you can take it, right? Someone who studied the sciences. The same problem was prevalent and present during the times of the Imams. Not all of them could distinguish between a fabrication and a solid, authentic hadith. But the Imams, right? The Imams are not just the Imams for the scholars. The Imams are not just Imams for the elites. They are not just Imams for the most learned or the ones who know hadith sciences. Of course, they all want us to be at that level. They all want us to be at a high level when it comes to our religious knowledge. But the reality is, many of us are not. Imam al-Hadi, the 10th Imam, and Imam Hassan Askari, these two beautiful Imams in particular, thought of a strategy to fill the gap. How are they going to fill this educational gap? Hadith is targeting usually a certain group of people at the top who understand and who can interact with this tradition. But how do we speak to the masses? How do we speak to the laymen of the Shia that necessarily may not have this level of expertise? So they bring the tradition and they emphasize more on the tradition of ziyarat. Because everyone goes to ziyarah. Every Shia loves to go to ziyarah. It's one of the best experiences in their lives. If you are in a classroom and someone is teaching you about religion, you're like, if it talks for half an hour, 40 minutes, you're like, okay, can I have a break, please? Because it's heavy on the mind. The mind needs a break. But when you go to ziyarah, more often than not, you usually don't want a break. It's usually a matter of difficulty detaching from ziyarah, from that experience. How difficult is it to walk in the courts of Imam al-Rida alayhi salam, that peace and tranquility you feel, inshallah many of you have been there, and then want to detach from that feeling. We don't want a break, right? It's such a good experience. How good is it that when you're looking at the shrine of Imam al-Hussein up close and you feel what you feel, you want more. Yeah, of course, eventually we'll become physically tired, but at a mental, spiritual level, we are revived, okay? So the Imams used this very vulnerable and impressionable opportunity to teach the layman. So they focused on a ziyarat heritage. Ziyarat Jami' al-Kabira, for example, yeah? Many of you may not know a hadith from the 10th or the 11th Imam. But some of you at least have heard of Ziyarah Jami' al-Kabira, or maybe even familiar with the words. You may not be familiar with the words of a hadith, right? But you may be familiar with the words of even Ziyarat Ashura. How many of us are familiar with the words of Ziyarat Ashura? Inni silmun liman salamakum wa harbun liman harabakum. I'll ask you now to recite me a hadith of Imam al-Sadiq out of memory, word by word. You will not be able to do that. It's very rare. But the words of Ziyarat Ashura, they stick with you. Similarly, the words of Ziyarat Jami' al-Kabira, written and authored by the 10th Imam. فَمَعَكُمْ مَعَكُمْ لَا مَعَ غَيْرِكُمْ. So the one who is with you is surely with you and will stay with you and will not go to the enemy. كَلَامُكُمْ نُور. Your words are lights. وَأَمْرُكُمْ رُشْدٌ. And your commands, your teachings are a catalyst for growth. These are words from Ziyarah Jami' Kabira. I know many brothers that have these memorized. أَمْرُكُمْ رُشْدٌ وَوَصِيَّتُكُمُ التَّقْوَى. And your recommendation and advice is one for piety. وَفِعْلُكُمْ خَيْرٌ. And what you do, you are directing the Imam as you are doing ziyarah. وَفِعْلُكُمْ خَيْرٌ. Your actions are one of goodness. وَعَادَتُكُمْ إِحْسَانٌ. Wow, how beautiful. Your habit is to do good to others. وَعَادَتُكُمْ إِحْسَانٌ وَسَجِيَّتُكُمْ karam. You're habituated to be generous to people, right? Bikum fatah Allah. With you God opens every goodness. Wa bikum khatam. And with you He closes every matter. See, these teachings about the stations of the Ahlul Bayt, the authority of the Ahlul Bayt, the kind of loyalty we should have to them was being instilled in the hearts of the followers of the Ahlul Bayt while they are in this vulnerable, emotional, spiritual state facing the shrine saying their ziyarah. You see that? You see how smart and creative the Imams are? You see how much they care for their followers? There's a lot of lessons to take from this. Firstly, is what I just mentioned. The Imams are extremely proactive and creative. Regardless of the environments they are placed in, regardless of the limitations the governments put on them, regardless of the restrictions and the swords and the spears that are facing them, the threats always pointing towards them, they will find a way to move the mission forward. How proactive are we in Sydney? Are we just sticking to the usual traditional method of propagating the message, or do we actually sit down and think creatively? Are we just accustomed to, doing the usual as our forefathers have done? Now we just do it with a bit more style because, we're the new age. Or do we sit down and creatively think to propagate and relay the message in a whole different way? What opportunities does this land provide for us? What opportunities does this country provide for us that we're too lazy to tap into? If the Imams, under heavy surveillance, under the threat of their life, right, are able to target their masses, are able to target their followers at every level using these genius methods, what are we doing? Alhamdulillah, we have a lot to do. I know there are restrictions. I know there are limitations, but there's a lot of opening as well. How often do we put our minds together? Brothers and sisters, at the end of the day, you're 20 and then you're 30 and then you're 40 and then you're old, okay? During this time, you try to do some khidmah. Is it better not to do khidmah creatively? That in a way, it actually moves the project forward? What does the verse say in the Holy Quran? Inni a'idhukum biwahida. I advise you to one thing. أن تقوموا لله مثنى وفرادا. That you get up for the cause of Allah in twos, in groups, and if there is no one, yourself. But it's very important what he says afterwards. ثم تتفكروا. Sit down and think, plan. What is the best way to use my youth to do khidmah? What is the best way to use my youth and this life that I only have one opportunity with? I'm going to lose it. This freshness, this intelligence, this energy, we all know it's going to go away. For some of us, we're already feeling it. The energy you had in your early 20s is not with you in your 30s. How best are we using it? The Imams taught us to be proactive. Imam Hassan Askari was your age. He was martyred at the age of 28, but it was working up here. long-term vision. The second lesson from this is, like the Imam used a method that was accessible to the masses to teach them their religion, today as well we have, of course we have the ziyarat, very effective, inshallah. You all go to ziyarah and recite these words, or you recite them from far. All the thawab that is mentioned for reciting ziyarat from far. But nowadays, we also have another popular method of consuming religious content, and there is, especially through the month of Muharram, through latmiyat and eulogies, yes? How often, if Imam Hassan Askari, Imam al-Hadi are thinking how to craft a ziyarat to teach the most profound of ideas about religion to their followers, how selective are we about the kind of latmiyat we're listening to? How selective are we about the kind of eulogies we are listening to? Once again, it's content at a level that is consumable by the masses, right? What the ziyarat was authored, the words were crafted by an imam. Now that we are giving a similar kind of attention to a similar kind of content, how selective are we with our criteria of listening to these things? Do we just listen because he has a nice beat, right? Some of these beats are, by the way, categorically haram, but it has a good catch to it. Are we listening because he just has a good voice? And the voice is very important. You've got the other problem. Someone doesn't have a good voice and is trying to recite. Ya akhi, don't recite. It's okay. Do something else. There's a lot of ways to do khidmah. If you go and you work on your voice, there's voice lessons and your voice is something presentable, ahlan wa sahlan. Good, you put in the effort. But this is a very effective mode of communication. He needs a good voice. But is that our only criteria as well? Oh, it's a good voice, it's really soothing. It should be there, but it's not sufficient. It's not enough. Even when it comes to content, is it just because, he talks about, right? Because he has the beat, he has the voice. Is it just because he talks about how tall and handsome Abbas alayhi salam was and how brave he was? How many people he killed and how his sword swung left, right? Is that what it is? Or how sad it is that Qasim salamullahi alayhi did not have a wedding? Is that all that we're focused about? Or how brave Imam Ali was? Our most important of religious models and figures, Imam Ali, Imam al-Hussein, Abbas, Qasim, Ali al-Akbar, salamullahi alayhim ajma'een, are just reduced to a few traits of bravery, of swordsmanship, of tragedy even. Is that all they are? Is that all they were? Are they going to be happy for them to just be remembered by these things? We have a good opportunity, right? We are listening to these things in the car. We are listening to them exercising. When I exercise, I listen to them. I love them, right? But we have to be selective. They're an important mode of education and we have to be very selective. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. ثانيا على حب فاطمة. The educational content is important with the things we listen to, and so is the spiritual content. Do I feel revived? Do I feel motivated? A man, a companion of Imam Hassan al-Askari, was in Ahwaz. Ahwaz is where? Iran, modern day Iran, south of Iran. We always had Shia in Ahwaz, in Qom, in Kash. He says, I debated someone from the Thanawiyya. Thanawiyya are people who believe in two gods, right? The God of the good and the bad, the God of light and the God of darkness. It's a form of shirk, a form of polytheism. He debates someone in Thanawiyya, in dualism, in Ahwaz. He thinks he did a good job in the debate, yeah? But when he leaves the debate, he says, something of the debate remained with me. Some of the arguments he was making kind of convinced me. Yeah, in the argument, I kind of silenced him. I showed him that I have the better side and all of that. But as they say, Baini wa bainak, I felt like, there was something of the argument remaining in my heart, that he was making sense. Firstly, there's a lesson here. How often do we see individuals going into debates and discussions because they feel emotional, because they feel zealous? They feel like, oh, they need to defend the religion. But that debate is above your pay grade. That debate is not for you to take. You enter with the intention of defending the faith online or otherwise, right? On TikTok Live or Discord or in person, like it happens in Speaker's Corner in London. That place should be, I have some really bad things to say about that place, but they should at least, abandon everyone. They should make it illegal to have democracy in that park. There should be no freedom of speech, because all it does is harm religion than do any good. A debate is way above the person's pay grade. You cannot simply win this debate. Yeah, I understand you felt attacked, you felt offended, you want to defend Imam al-Hussein, you want to defend Imam Ali alayhi salam, but do you have the expertise? So because sometimes we feel emotional, we enter a debate in person, in work, in school, or online. What we end up doing is harming the religion. What we end up doing, not only we harm the religion, we leave the debate weaker in our faith than we enter the debate, like what happened to this companion. This companion of Imam, the 11th Imam, enters a debate with a Zoroastrian, a dualist, someone who believes in two gods. And he's like, look, I think I won, but between me and myself, I think I lost a little bit as well. I copped a few hits. He goes to Samarra, where Imam Hassan al-Askari is. Of course, there was a lot of pressure on the Imam. It wasn't always easy to visit him. A lot of the times, the companions could just see him on the streets. To go and see him in his house was very difficult, because then you could be traced, right? That you have links. You know, how does it happen now if someone gets tagged by the intelligences here, right? Anyone who has like links with them, they try to avoid them altogether, because now you're going to be associated. No phone calls, delete the contact. You know how it happens. Maybe you don't know how it happens, but that's how it happens. Imam Hassan al-Askari is put in this kind of spotlight by the forces of the Abbasids. And so no one is allowed. And the Imams did not want this as well. Even on the streets, because the Imam does not want his followers to be identified with him and traced back to him, in a very sad historical report is mentioned that he guides his followers and tells them, "An la yusallimanna alayya ahadun." No one is allowed to say hi to me on the streets. Do not send your salams to me on the streets. وَلَا يُشِيرُ إِلَيْهِ. Don't point to me. Oh, that's the Imam. Can you see him? Can you see how difficult that is? Imagine seeing the Imam of your time, right? You cannot see a friend and not point to him or say hi to him. Imagine you saw Sayyid al-Sistani, right? Hafidhahullah. Or Sayyid al-Khamenei, or one of the top maraja. And you're like, oh, there he is. Let's go say hi to him. Let's try to get a photo or something. At the very least, you want to pay your respects. This is the Imam of your time, but there's so much persecution and surveillance that you're not allowed to even say hi or point towards him. So this is how difficult it was to see the Imam generally, right? And this individual really didn't have the opportunity to see the Imam directly. But he passes by the Imam on the streets in a public event, and he sees the Imam points to him. He points to him and he says, Ahadan farada. What is he talking about? The Imam is talking about God. God is one, unique. The Imam had no interaction with this individual, but by the bestowing of Allah, the kind of knowledge they have been given, Allah allows them to know certain extraordinary things. So he was aware of the debate he had, and the debate had an effect on his heart. Although logically, he knew he was on the right, but his heart was affected. So the Imam saw the need to purify his heart, okay? To spiritually interfere with him, to give him a spiritual experience to remove that impurity. So he looked at him and said, Ahadan farada. God is one, He's unique. The narrator says, after I felt this energy from the Imam, of course this was not just any simple ahadan farda. There is some divine force behind it. Like I said, there's a spiritual energy interference behind it. He says, I fainted. I lost my conscience because the Imam interfered with him. And that doubt was removed from his heart. You know what that teaches us? It teaches us that books is not always enough. No matter how much you educate yourself, no matter how much you read, no matter how many classes you attend, there is an element of spirituality and emotion and faith that needs to be involved. And that can only be secured with worship. That can only be secured with having solitude with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That can only be secured with having a relationship, an emotional, spiritual relationship with the Imam. If we have that, how often does it happen that when we read a ziyarah, even from far, you read ziyarat Ashura, right? Or inshallah, we are there. How often does it happen that your heart feels strength? In these dead lands, spiritually dead, right? We get affected by the darkness we are surrounded with, whether you like it or not. I come from Qom. Even if I'm not the most spiritual person, day in and day out, I'm dealing with the shrine of Sayyidah Ma'sooma salamullahi alayha. Day in and day out, I'm dealing with teachers who are pious. They have dedicated years and decades to this path. Their face just shows nur. You have students and your colleagues who are pious. Even if I just interact with them, some of that light would come to me. Some of that light. You walk into a perfume shop, you walk out with some perfume. You walk out with a good scent. When you are surrounded by such light, when you are surrounded by so much spirituality, you're bound to have a higher level. When you are here, you're surrounded by the opposite. Of course it's going to affect us. And if of course it's going to leave its remnants in our hearts. Left, right, center, we see haram. We are surrounded by impurity, by darkness. Of course it's going to have an effect. If we do not proactively take worship seriously, more than we should in those lands, then this heart will become darkened. It will not feel so. It will start to doubt easier. It will start to be open to sinning easier and disobedience easier. It will become easy for it to sin because it's already accepting. The grounds for it is now open. Having a connection with an imam, how often does it happen that a ziyarah experience, a good prayer, a good recitation of the Quran, a salat al-layl makes you strong, right? You have the strength. Ya Allah, Ya Rahman, Ya Rahim, Ya Muqallib al-Qulub. Oh, the turner of the hearts. You control the hearts. Thabbit qalbi ala dinik. Strengthen my heart on the religion. It's so difficult sometimes in these places to have that strengthening of the heart. But if we have a spiritual connection with God, an emotional connection with the Imams, they will help us. They will interfere, like Imam al-Hassan Askari interfered with that man. The reason I say knowledge is not enough, because there have been individuals that were way more knowledgeable than you and I. There is a very, very shocking and alarming story of an alim in the minor occultation. His name is Shalmaghani. I believe Shalmaghani is probably an area. This individual is the leading jurist of his time, the top marja'. Of course, the Imam is in ghaiba, so they can't always ask the Imam directly. They will ask the scholars. The Imam had his 4 proxies and agents and Nuwab al-Arba'a. But you also had scholars of hadith, scholars of fiqh. This Shalmaghani was so highly respected and renowned and revered in his community, right, that it is mentioned that his books, our houses were filled with his books. When you go to every Shia's house, you see a book of Shalmaghani there during the minor occultation. He was a companion of Imam Hassan al-Askari, and he was also alive during the minor occultation. He had a book called At-Taklif, which was his fiqhi opinions according to the reports of the Ahlul Bayt. This book of Taklif, his fiqhi positions, was given to the 3rd proxy, the 3rd representative, official representative of the 12th Imam. Who knows his name? He has a very distinct name. I don't think you'll forget it after tonight. The 3rd representative was called Husayn ibn Ruh. Okay? It's a very unique name. Husayn ibn Ruh gives an approval to this book. Says the book of Al-Shalmaghani, At-Taklif, all of it is good, except 2 narrations, except 2 rulings. Imagine that. Imagine you have a marja' taqlid today that can get an approval for all of his risala, that all of the rulings he has is correct, that the representative of the Imam stamps its approval. How much of a respect do you want? Imagine one of the Maraja had today. All Maraja in the beginning of their books today, in their Rasala, they say, this is mubri'un lidhimma. If you follow this, you have removed the responsibility from your shoulders. Does that mean necessarily this was the right ruling? This is what actually Allah had ordained? They're like, look, we're trying our best here. And that's why there's a difference of opinion. So, at the end of the day, they say, this is mubri'un lidhimma. This will exonerate you. Yawm al-Qiyamah, they say, who did you follow? I say, I followed this marja because he was the most knowledgeable. This is enough. Maybe that's not how you're supposed to pray. But as long as the marja did his work of research, okay, so he is mubri'un lidhimma. He has nothing on his shoulders. He did his best to find the ruling. And you went and did taqleed and you imitated the most knowledgeable. But no one comes and says, I have an approval from the representative of the Imam. That's a big deal. If someone could say that today, everyone would do taqleed of him. This is the status of Shalmaghani. This is the station he reaches. When Hussein ibn Ruh is elected to be the third proxy, by the way, does anyone know the names of the previous ones? The first is Uthman ibn Sa'id, okay? The second is the son of Uthman, Muhammad ibn Uthman, and the third is Hussein ibn Ruh. When Hussein ibn Ruh is selected as the third proxy, as the third representative, he feels hurt. It's like, how could that be? I thought I was the top G in this house. I thought it was all about me. Everyone has my books. Everyone is following my rulings, I am saying. I even got an approval. How is it that the Imam has selected Hussein ibn Ruh to be the representative? He revolted. He opposed the Imam. He opposed Hussein ibn Ruh. He said, no, I should be. He created a sect under his name. They died out pretty young, pretty early on. Shalmaghaniya. From being the leading scholar amongst the Shia, being so respected, he became the leader of a deviant crew, a deviant ideological cult. Why? Why is that the case? The Imam, by the way, issues a statement, a letter against him, condemning his action. Of course, how dare you go against my orders? That's because knowledge is not enough. Knowledge is never enough. Knowledge is just the start. All of this recommendation that we see for knowledge, yes, from the Imams. Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam says, if I could whip my followers into obeying them, into gain knowledge, I would do that, but I can't do that. Imam al-Sadiq wants to use physical force to teach us. That's how important knowledge is, but it's only the start. It's only the start. Otherwise, we become like Shalmaghani. If we do not have that spiritual connection, if we do not have that faith accompanied with worship, that softness and tenderness of the heart, we become like Shalmaghani. There's a deep, besides this, like that knowledge is not enough. It goes to show that if our seeking of knowledge, our religiosity, right, this pertains to people like me, maybe more than some of you, but mashallah, the fact that you're attending here shows that you are from the most religious of Sydney, inshallah. If we place at the recesses of our minds and the depths of our hearts, we feel that our religiosity, our spirituality is one to gain the attention of people. Not only this is a threat to the acceptance of our deeds, yani ya ret, that was it. They would say, Yawm al-Qiyamah, look, you just wasted your time. All of this stuff you did, all of these deeds, all of these actions, all of this khidmah, all of this spirituality you showed is not accepted. The problem is, the further problem is, the most serious problem is when our spirituality, when our religiosity, right, becomes for the sake of showing, it becomes the cause of our downfall. It has the opposite effect. You wish it was just neutral, that it did nothing. It has the opposite effect of dragging us down to the depth of deviancy, of misguidance, of hellfire, like Shalmaghani. You oppose the Imam of your time, and the reason is very clear. Of course, having 100% sincerity is always very difficult. We know, all of us know, we're human beings, we're weak creatures. We hope to have 100% sincerity. But it's not always easy. That's normal. That's something we work on. That's one thing to have strands of insincerity in our actions. Inshallah, God helps us to remove those. But it's a whole nother thing when the basis of our religiosity, the basis of our religious identity is one of showing off. That becomes our downfall, because then when we do not receive the praise that we require and we need to feel good about ourselves because we made our entire life and our identity about this thing, right? Imagine your whole identity is surrounding this idea of being recognized as a religious person in the community. And imagine then you do not receive the respect that you want. Someone else is put higher than you. Someone else is seen as more pious than you. You will revolt. I will revolt against God himself because I put in so much work so I could be seen as someone, as X, Y, and Z, as Haji that, as Karbalai that, as Sheikh X. Now no one is respecting me. The core of my identity is shaken. I will crumble. And I will fall to the depths that I do not want to fall. That's why Shalmaghani fall. The basis and the pivot of his spirituality was godless, was non-divine, was aslan anti-divine. We ask Allah to protect us. We really ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us from our own deeds sometimes. And grant us sincerity. We want to come here to be purified. Not that the majalis of Imam al-Hussein, the majalis of remembering and commemorating the Imams becomes as a means of our downfall. How sad is that? خَسِرَ الدُّنْيَا وَالْآخِرَةِ. We have lost this dunya because we're not out there having fun. The dunya has a lot to offer. And we lost the akhirah. It's really sad. It's really tragic. We want this connection in particular with the Imam of our time. And sometimes we think, you know what? And I'll end with this inshallah. The Imam is in occultation. Right? What do you want me to do? You know, okay, I'll go ziyarah once a year, I'll do these things. When you keep talking about this idea of having a connection with the Imam, how do I do this? Right? It seems disconnected for most of us because you speak about companions that could at least see the Imam on the streets, that could interact with the Imam at least via letters. How does this idea of having the Imam of our time become relevant to me? How do you expect me to feel some kind of connection to the Imam when he's not present? You see, my brothers, there is two kinds of occultations. There are two kinds of ghaiba. There is a global collective ghaiba, right? That the Imam, his identity is not known. Yani he's amongst us. He's not in hiding, as some say. He's amongst us, but his identity is not known. If we saw him on the streets, we'll not recognize him. That's his ghaiba. That he is not allowed to introduce himself with his identity until God permits him. That's a global communal ghaiba, and that's the one we usually pray for, yeah? That, you know, God, please, Allahumma ajjal li waliyika al-faraj wal-afiyata wal-nasra. Yeah, nasr, victory, outward victory. We read the narration that he will fill the earth with justice. We see what's happening on our TV screens, on our mobile screens. We see what's happening to Gaza, to Lebanon. We're like, oh, ajjal li waliyika al-faraj. Where is Allahumma nashku ilayka faqta nabiyina, right? We complain to God about the absence of our Prophet, the absence of our wali, the absence of our Imam. Whenever we think about this ghaiba, we think about a communal ghaiba, we think about a global political ghaiba. But more often than not, we should think about this personal ghaiba, this personal occultation that we have with the Imam. The Imam could be present. We could be living during the time of Imam Ali alayhi salam. We could be living during the time of Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, but be in personal ghaiba. How does that happen? Either we don't even know the Imam. Alhamdulillah, at least we know the identity of the Imam. We know his name. We know of his existence. But more realistically, more tangibly, we live our lives as if the Imam is not there. It's some abstract idea. Yeah, the 12th Imam. He is in occultation, inshallah, he will come. But being honest with myself, how often do I wake up in the morning, right, feeling like there is a person active in this world, like many of our leaders, doing something on the ground, like the Imam of our time? How often do we have that thought? Or is it more of a disconnected, abstract idea of a promise to come? Because the world is in a bad place. But how often is it a question about my own ghaiba, my own problems that I need the Imam for? One of the most important roles of the Imam, if not the most important role of the Imam, is this batini guidance, al-hidayah batiniyah, this internal guidance that all of us need. Remember the story I just said of Imam Hassan al-Askari? All he did was point to him, ahadan farda. This internal guidance of the heart, is what we truly need from the Imam. To take our hearts through its phases, to remove the impurities. Imagine if we had Rasulullah present with us. Would you not go sit down with him, do salat behind him? Aslan, kiss his hands. Have his hands placed on your heart, on your chest. Would that not have an effect? Would that not have an effect on our spiritual journey? Of course it will. Of course it will. The Imam could be present. We could be during the time of the 6th or the 7th Imam, but we could be in a personal ghaiba. We could be in a personal occultation. We could be the one that's hiding from the Imam of our time. So this personal ghaiba has nothing to do with the communal ghaiba. The fact that the Imam is not allowed to reveal his identity for the world to know. They're two completely separate topics. Many of our most spiritual scholars would say, okay, you pray for the coming of the Imam at a global scale. That will happen, and we have to do our part for that. But how concerned are we for a personal zuhur, a personal reappearance? And an easy sign of that is when you wake up. When you wake up. Inshallah, some of us read dua ahd here and there. I'm not trying to say I read this every day. But sometimes when you read it, right? And you read the words, do you have this connection that, hey, I wake up and the Imam wakes up? I roam this earth, I walk this earth, I do things and he does things. We're on the same side. I am on his team. We're achieving something here. If a bit of that, slowly but surely, envelops inside us, then we can say we have a level of zuhur with the Imam, that we are coming out of the ghaiba, that personal ghaiba. These spiritual scholars say, it is your sins, my sins. I'm talking about myself. It is my sins, it is my disobedience, it is my impurities, it is my internal doubts that allows me not to see the Imam, not to interact with the Imam. Yes, some people see the Imam. They have interactions with the Imam. These shuhada, young men. If one thing the story of Shalmaghani teaches us is that the criteria for you to be important for the Imam is not knowledge. Yeah, it could be required. But it's sincerity. It's not age, how long you've been in the hawza. It's not the title you have, marja' taqleed. You could be Shalmaghani. You could be the most basic student. You could be the most basic tradesman, right? But the Imam will choose you for your sincerity. Imam Ali alayhi salam had a servant by the name of Qambar. Imam al-Sadiq in a report says, وَكَانَ لِعَلِيٍّ غُلَامٌ اسْمُهُ قَنْبَرْ يُحِبُّ عَلِيًّا شَدِيدًا. Imam Ali had a servant, a slave, right? That was owned. He was not a free person. Imam al-Sadiq, imagine that, another Imam is speaking about you and the first thing he says that you loved Imam Ali a lot. That's an honor. That's a pride, yeah? He was not a scholar in the official sense. Qanbar was not a scholar in the official sense. He was a simple man. But he was sincere. He was devoted to the Imam and the Imam chose him. We could be the most basic of individuals, but because this idea of personal occultation, we have worked to come out of that occultation. We've worked to come out of that hiding of ourselves, that realize that we have a Father that thinks about us, that cares about us. And I want to be on his team. If there is a network, I want to be a node on that network. I want to be a light bulb on that network. I want to do something for him. I want to feel connected. And trust me, my brothers and sisters, in a world where people are not finding meaning, in a world where there's a crisis of identity and meaning and purpose, this is one of the best ways to find meaning. How do you think the brothers in the South The brothers in Gaza, how do you think they are ready to give up everything? Because they have seen the greatest manifestation of meaning. They have seen what it means to live a life of purpose. Who cares if they don't live another 30 years more than you and I? What have we done with this 30 that we're going to do with the rest of it? But the 30 they live, the 20 they live with purpose, they live with quality, they live with connection, they live with meaning and depth. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with the barakah, with the maqam, the sha'an, the status that Imam Hassan Askari has with him, that his son, this beautiful individual, this man who we await to have a true connection with, and to be a node in his network, to be a soldier, a foot soldier, but a sincere one. Whatever it is that I do, I have some sincerity in serving this man. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to A, grant us the knowledge that we require, and B, grant us the sincerity that we need to move along this path.